And I am. All right, now that we're recording, I'll start over. So in case you missed my introduction, my name is Bill Pike, and I am the coordinator for Arizona Mesa. And with me today is going to be my partner in crime, Manny Leon, who is the assistant director for Arizona Mesa.
Good morning, everybody. Nice to be here. Nice to see you all.
So we might wait another minute to make sure everybody is coming in. I know that we went a little bit right up against the keynote, and some people may want to get up, stretch, get a drink, whatever that happens to be. So we'll wait just about another minute, and hopefully we'll stay on time.
And gentlemen, if you'd like, I can monitor the chat function for you, drop anything in that you need link-wise. So I have everything pulled up and ready to go. So whatever you need today. Okay.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Hey, buddy, are you not able to talk?
You're hyper. Hi, friend.
So let's get going because it is 10:05. Well, it's 10:05 Arizona time. So wherever you happen to be, it's 5 minutes after the hour. First thing, if you have any questions after the session is finished or at any point during the convening, we did create a parking lot for people to be able to put their comments, their questions, their feedback, whatever that happens to be. You can see the link there. I also put it in the chat during the space there. And we are going to try to make sure to answer these questions at the end of every day. So if, as you're going through the day, you're like, oh, I have a question, please make sure to visit the parking lot, put your questions. You know, we all know that things come up later. So definitely don't hold on to your question. Let us know what it is, and we'll try to answer it before the end of the day. So as we said before, my name is Bill Pike, and I'm the coordinator for Arizona Mesa. And with me is my colleague, the assistant director, Manny Leon. And we have done this presentation in a couple of different spaces, and we want to be able to do it with you here. And it is very adaptable for what we're doing. It works best in a in-person space, but also works great in a virtual space. So one of the things that I want to make sure that we do is that we have some group norms. I recognize that we're all at home or we're all in a virtual space and things come up. I heard someone talking about how they're having connectivity issues, and that's fine. But please try to stay engaged as much as you can throughout the space. And make sure that when you're speaking your truth, and knowing that it's only part of the truth. So my truth might be different than Ling's, that might be different than Manny's, that might be different from yours as well too, because we all have different experiences. And so what I've experienced is most likely going to be different than what you've experienced. And we want to make sure that we're getting that truth out there. And this is also part of something that we do when we're teaching too. You know, we want to make sure our students are able to speak their truth, and it may be different than what our own is based on their experience. And part of that is going to be, we're going to want to experience some discomfort. You know, we just had a great keynote that there was definitely some things said in there that were a little bit challenging, a little bit discomforting. So we want to make sure that we're okay to know that we are going to experience some discomfort. And we can expect, and we need to accept that we might not have closure in all of the things that we talk about. Right? And that's part of the bigger issues that we need to make sure that we're discussing about. We want to take risks. You know, it's very easy to sit and stay safe, but definitely put yourself out there, because we are trying to create a safe environment. And we want to make sure that you have a space to take some risks in there as well too. And check in with yourself. If you feel yourself being overwhelmed by the conversation that we might be having, or you're overwhelmed by the activity that we're going to do, or whatever else it happens to be, you know, it's okay. And it's okay to also take a step back and regather yourself, or do what you need to do that's right for you. Because one of the things that we want to make sure that we're doing is that we have a diverse, inclusive, accepting, welcoming, safe space for everybody.
This is how you're gonna make the.
So, with all that being said, I like to jump right in and do things. So we are going to jump right into the activity. So what's going to happen is we're going to break you into 3 breakout rooms, right? So on the agendas, we said that you need some paper, some tape, some scissors, a pencil. It's optional, but not encouraged. If you want a ruler or a straight edge, that also is optional, but it's not required, right? So what we're going to do in these different breakout rooms is you are going to create an origami walrus. Okay. We're going to give you 15 minutes to do that. And then when we come back to the main room in 15 minutes, we're going to show off our creations. So before we create the breakout rooms, are there any questions? Kim, I see your hand is raised.
Thank you so much. Do I have to only use one piece of paper like traditional origami, or do I get to cut and tape things?
That is 100% your choice.
Thank you for clarifying.
Any other questions? If you have a question and you're raising your hand and I don't see you, please put it into the chat. Okay, that wait time is over. So I'm going to create the breakout rooms right now. Right, so please join your breakout rooms. And Manny, if you want to take room 2, I will take room 1. And Ling, just so you know, if anybody raises their hand or wants someone to come to any of the rooms, don't do it. That's actually part of what we're trying to do.
Okay, do you want me to just stay here in the main room or? go to the
Yes,
breakout
please.
room?
Yeah, and if someone joins in, tell them they're making an origami walrus and put them in room 3.
Okay, Hello.
Thank you.
Um, Hi. Are
I
you
got
just,
kicked.
you got kicked
No, I
out?
was here. I was in a meeting room and I'm making my way out. My wall.
Oh, okay. Do you remember which breakout room you were in?
I think it was 3.
Okay, let me put you in room 3. Hello. Hello. Hello.
Hi. Let's see, am I in the right place?
This one's Let Go Your Bias in the track A Mason Time of Uncertainty. And I'm wondering, is that the group you want to be with? Because I can put you in a room. You will just some
Yeah,
paper.
because I'm actually a panelist for, I think at 2 o'clock Mountain Time.
Panelists for 2 o'clock. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So you're with the next session, I'm going to assume with What's Wrong with
Amanda.
Avery? Or
Navigating Uncertainty.
okay, navigating uncertainty, continuing impactful Mesa work during pandemic shutdowns and more.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
And that one's at 2 o'clock Mountain Time. So we're at
Right.
11:22 Mountain Time right now.
Okay. Yeah, see, I'm Eastern Time, so.
Oh, okay. So you probably want to log back. Oh my goodness. That's gonna be towards the end of the day for you. It would be at 4 o'clock your time.
Right. Yeah, that's right. So, but right now, I guess what are they doing?
They're doing an exercise
Lego your
called, yeah,
Lego your bias.
yeah.
Oh,
And
okay.
everybody has been provided with the minimal amount of instructions on what they need to be doing right now, which is they are all in breakout rooms and they are creating origami whales.
Okay. Yeah, I remember doing something like that before after working with that implicit association stuff.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where we're at
Yeah.
right now.
Okay. Okay. Well, I'll just come back in later and take a longer break.
Okay, there's also other, you can take a longer break, or if there's another session you wanted to attend, we also have going on right now in the other Invention Ed track, the globalization from UN sustainability goals to designing for equity in your community, if you're interested in that one. And I can drop the link in the chat for you.
Okay, that would be great.
Okay, hold on. Let me just grab that. And put it in there for you. So if you just click on that link, it should take you to the globalization one. Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ling.
You're welcome. So glad to have you here.
Okay.
Here. Hi,
Here-
Anne.
Yeah, here we go.
Hi, Anne. Are you here for logged in early for session 2, or would you like me to put you in a room? Did you get kicked out of a room or anything?
Oh, hi, sorry. I was just taking a break. No, I was in a room.
Okay.
Wasn't anything going on in the room, so I just came back early.
Oh, okay. Not a problem. I just wanted to check in with you and make sure that that you didn't need anything or for me to move you somewhere. So,
No, I'm good.
all right, cool. All right. I'll let you go back to it then. Thanks for your time.
Okay.
welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. We're gonna wait about another 20 seconds for the breakout rooms to finish getting everyone back in here. So at this point, Ling, if you could take the spotlight off of me. At this point, I want everyone to hold up their walrus to your camera so that we can see what you've made.
I have a camera problem, so I can show mine, but mine is color green.
Thank you, Ruben. I appreciate you you sharing that. And no worries if your camera's not working. All right, so we're kind of looking around. I'm seeing a lot of different things being made here. Some of them, Liz, yours looks like a cat. Am I correct in that, or did you? Okay, you made a cat. All right.
Unintentionally, but yes.
Okay. All right. I've seen a lot of different sort of creation spaces. And so what I want to share with you is how we set this up. Room 1, which is where I was, had teacher-led instruction. So I walked everybody through the steps. Room 2, which is where Manny was, just had the instructions. Room 3 had nothing. And so we can see as we're looking at these that there are some very different creations have been made. And so that's actually the whole point of this activity is we wanted you to experience what happens when you have a lot of resources, you have some resources, and you have only your own knowledge to base on. So want to kind of ask some questions. As you were working in your groups, what did you see happening? And please unmute or put it in the chat.
In group 3, we just said hello and then basically kept to ourselves.
In group 2, we laughed a lot.
We talked through, like people talked through what they were doing or their enthusiasm or maybe disappointment with their project.
I was in room 2 also, and again, because we were talking, I got an idea from someone else that they had cut out their tusks. So I then made my own tusks too.
As you're going to put in there, we asked how much is this much?
Yeah, the instructions were kind of vague, so yeah. But it helped that the others who were quick, they were quick creators, they showed their design. So you have an idea how much is how much.
Right. So while you were working, how did you feel about this?
I said my stress level went up as soon as origami was mentioned, because I am not good at puzzles, like jigsaw puzzles. I'm not at the folding stuff. I had a hard time in junior high when we made those little things that, you could flip them open, you count, and yeah. So that's how I felt at first, but my group did help ease my pain.
So some anxiety going in because of your own personal experiences, and then it felt better as you got in with the group. I see uncertain, but since it was low risk, it was fun.
That's kind of how I felt too. I've been terrible at origami, partly with that whole dyslexia thing. Left is right, up is down, backwards is forward. But since I knew we would just have fun showing what we made, I got really excited and really intense on making a good one. But then I was running out of time and I'm like, well, it'll be okay. And we'll laugh at how badly I did.
And I see I got excited to create and explore, but a little relieved when we had instructions. I Googled directions, wasn't group due, and felt something was missing. I was confused because we had no instructions, so I Googled them.
Right. And I'm in group 3 too. And whenever it comes to not having instructions or like teacher-led guidance, I don't want to say I don't try as hard, but it makes me drop some interest a little bit. I like the freedom of exploring, but then like the expectations, I just don't. I'm like, oh, make this. And it's like, okay, well, it's freedom, but it aggravates me a little bit. Like, I guess I'm a teacher to be that structured design. And when I don't have it, I get a little anxious.
Right, because we did say make an origami walrus, so the expectation was there. If we had just said, we want you to create something that's like origami, then it might not have been as stressful, right?
And kind of taking that idea of, how you were feeling right there. Now put yourselves in the spaces of your students, because sometimes the students are like, oh, I am getting this instruction. I know what I need. Other times it's, uh-oh, what do I do? And sometimes it's just like, here's a task, go do it. And there's no backup, no follow-up, no place to ask questions for some of them. And so, how does that, think about how you were feeling that space and how your students might feel given the space that you were in. Which brings me to another question. When we got back to this main group and you saw the things that you had made and the things that other people had made, how did you feel?
Well, I immediately was like, well, I already knew mine was a sad little piece of paper, but I was just laughing and having fun with it. But it's stressful. It gives you a little bit of anxiety. Like I don't measure up to the rest of my class. And I don't want to show my work because it's not as good as everybody else's.
I like the comment in the chat of, it sucked.
Wait. For me, I was in a group where we got like the full instructions. And then when I saw the other one, I was like, oh, like they did something different where it kind of gave me anxiety too, because like I was like, did I do mine wrong? Did I, like you kind of you second guess it, even though you're like, no, he waited for us. He gave us the instructions, like, and so it kind of gives you anxiety just kind of looking at everybody else's stuff. And you're like, wait, is mine wrong? So that was what I initially thought.
This is Kim in New Mexico, and I like the lack of rules. I could feel it was a creative challenge early, but I did feel empathy for the people in my room that you could understand. It's not their comfort zone and they're struggling. And I think that happens in teams often too, and how you can help other people or encourage them with what they have.
And then one of the differences that happens when we do this activity in person, right? We're building Legos, and it's a similar setup where one team has just Legos, one team has the Legos and the box, so they can see what it's supposed to look like. And then one team has the Legos, the box, or the Legos, and then the full instructions, right? So you're able to see what the other teams have in terms of resources, right? Where you guys were all a little bit blind in that sense that you didn't know that the other groups didn't have those. So it plays out a little bit differently when we're in person, because the group that has only the Legos can see that other people have instructions or at least the box. And so that changes the conversation a little bit too when we're having the kind of debrief.
That brings us to the question I want to ask here is, was this activity fair? Did you feel like this activity was fair for you?
I would say I like the challenge. I probably would like team 3 because I like to get creative. The step-to-step instructions, I like went above and beyond because I was like, oh, I'm gonna try this over here, but I used 2 different pieces of paper.
Well, I thought our group was fair until we got back and everybody else had a different set of instructions. Now it's not fair.
If we were being graded on this and you had an expectation, but not enough support, I think it would be incredibly unfair.
And so was there a bias or inequity within this activity? I see some people shaking their heads. I see someone's just like, yes. And I see a lovely dog. And so this is really the point of this activity. And like Manny was saying earlier, we do this activity. It works really great in person where you can see what's happening around there. And so you really can get a better sense of the unfairness of this. So let me share my screen again. So here's a little bit of information about how we run this activity when we're in person. We've done this activity a couple of times in person. We've also done this activity a couple of times virtually. And we seem to come back to this, but this is a great activity to start introducing the concepts of unfairness and bias within the space. Because this activity I purposely wrote to be unfair. Group one, at one point, I told them, hey, we need to cut our paper because origami paper is 8.5 by 8.5. Nobody else received that instructions. And group three didn't get any instructions. It's just make it. So there's definitely some things that are in there that are part of this. So here's a little bit of information about what we do and kind of the onus of this activity. So that if it is something you want to take and use for yourself within your classrooms, within your different MESA states, you can. But the idea is really we want to set it up so there are definite differences in the groups when they're working on it. Because what this leads us into is unconscious bias. Right? And we heard a little bit of it talked about as we were having our reaction spaces. And so we know there's two types of bias. There's conscious bias and unconscious bias. And the unconscious bias is the brain making those quick judgments and activities. This is a survival skill that we've developed over millenniums to make sure that we are stayed safe, right? And we want to make sure that as we're talking, as we're doing these, that we're paying attention to them. I know I have my biases. I know Manny has his. You all have them too. It's what are we doing about that? And so I just want to kind of talk about a little bit with some of the different types of unconscious bias that we experience both as teachers and what your students may also experience as well as they're moving through the classroom. And so the first one I want to bring up is gender bias. And this is one that is both overt and covert. This assumption that there are certain abilities to act or dress in the same ways. And now as we move into people identifying as non-binary, they're cisgenders or trans, or I never keep up with all the different labels. There are certain things that people are trying to figure out, but there are those certain biases, and Dr. McGee alluded to it as well in her speech where she talked about African-American women with PhDs. So some of those biases is, what are we doing with those? Are you more likely to call on males over females? Are students more likely to try to pick a group of same gender rather than different gender? And these are things that we want to make sure that we're looking at and saying, okay, this is not as diverse a group as we're talking about, because we know that everybody, regardless of gender, has good ideas. Everybody, regardless of gender, can do the work, but are people grouping themselves in ways where that unconscious gender bias is popping up?
And then I think within MESA, you can see it within teams, right? Where sometimes your male voices may be more comfortable in sharing right away in those team spaces and talking about ideas, especially when you're in STEM, and female voices may not, even though they have, a lot to contribute to the project. And again, these are generalities, right? It's not going to be the case with every specific person, but there's some things that and I think when you look back at Dr. McGee's presentation, right, you're seeing some of those things that are happening in these smaller, informal and formal education spaces that play out long-term into some of the things that she shared with us.
And if at any point you have something to say, please definitely unmute or put it in the chat, because we do want to make sure this is a discussion space as well too. And we know we don't know everything. And we know that some of our experiences are not reflective of the entire group. And so another one is name bias. And this is something that we see all the time. And I'll tell a story about this. I was teaching, and it's the first day of class and calling roll. And I'm getting down to a young man whose last name was Phauc, P-H-A-N. And I'm looking at it, and it was spelled P-H-O-U-C. And I looked at that and I'm like, uh-oh, if I mispronounce it, I'm going to say fuck. I'm not going to say that in front of a bunch of high school kids. And I'm sweating this. I'm like, oh no, all right, what am I going to do? And I know I can identify who it is because he was the only Asian male in the classroom. And I get to the name right before his, and I go, he goes, Andy. And right there, he was already compensating for that space. And what I learned is that his name is Phuoc. And he decided that he wanted to be called that because too many people mispronounced it, and too many people were just like, oh, I'm going to make jokes about this. And we see this a lot. We see students coming in with names that are different. One student I remember was named Halima Abdi Dikar. Wonderful student. Had to do a little mispronunciation of her name when I first met her because I wasn't sure how to pronounce it. So, this is something that, people do when they don't know they don't feel comfortable pronouncing the name. Let's get back. So we want to make sure that we're learning our students' names. Students are learning each other's names, and we're using them in ways that are not giving them some kind of nickname like, hey, sport, or hey, something where I don't have to learn your name. I'm going to call you something else, because a name is a crucial part of our identity. And yes, sometimes it's easier to call someone something else, but is that something that they want to be called? I'll tell another story. Had a great student who, I asked, what do you want to be called? And he decided he wanted to be called Princess Sparkle. Okay, I called him Princess Sparkle the entire year. I called him Princess Sparkle when he graduated. He is now in the Navy, and every once in a while I'll send him a message being like, hey, what's up, Princess Sparkle? Because that's what he wanted me to call him. And it was a nice space. He thinks it's funny. I think it's funny. But it's also one of those spaces where that was the name he chose and he's stuck with it. And we know students are using different names as they're exploring their identities. I have a daughter, her given name is Serena. She's being called Ren right now because that's what she wants to be called. So, learning their names and being able to call them by their name is such a powerful tool that we want to do. And Rowena, I see the call them by their nickname. Absolutely. My given name is William. I much prefer to be called Bill. The only person allowed to call me William is my mother. So yeah, absolutely. Call them by their nicknames, call them what they want to be called. And that helps give them that space. So look into the chat. Does anybody want to add anything, or don't let me talk all the time? I'm not that interested.
Yeah, I think learning names are an important part of kind of creating that safe space, right? Even if the student might have a nickname, right? Taking the time, asking them to share the correct pronunciation, maybe even talking about where the name comes from, right? Creates that level of respect, that inclusivity within the classroom. And it also shows the students like, hey, me as a teacher, right? I'm willing to be uncomfortable and ask questions in order to learn something new. And that creates that, that expectation that, I would like everyone to kind of stretch themselves, even if it may not be something comfortable, or I might think that the expectation is that I should already know this. By creating that, you're creating that safe space for people. So sometimes there's more that goes along with that. But of course, you're also showing respect for their culture, and what their name is by taking the time to correctly pronounce it and learn how to say it.
Sorry, you put something very interesting in the chat. Does that happen a lot where students request that they don't honor a student's name, a different name? I see it. Leslie shaking her head.
It's more of the parents. I was like, I'm gonna as a reciprocate what Sarah as like posted in the chat, that there are oftentimes I interacted with the student this year that is was born a female but wanted to be preferred to be called as a male name, as I believe her as a given name was Yasmin, but then she wanted to be called Toby and be identified as more of they them pronouns, because then I was like, at a young age, I think this was a sixth grader, as like they were trying to as a form their own identities, but coming from a Hispanic household, they're very traditional, very as a proud as what that cultural mindset is, that she never wanted to let her parents know that that's what as she liked to be called in school outside of the household. So in the household that she prefers her as a given name, but outside the household where she'd be a little bit more free, as like that name is what she chose as to be called, because then that's her as a discovering who she is. And that's sort of just what they go through. And as a lot of other students in that school as are going through the exact same thing, and especially this new generation, that's what as a parents are not aware of, or just don't really, coming from that culture of mindset, as aware we are, as I'm here in Washington State, as like on the reservation. So then that's a lot what we have to deal with.
Yeah, and that's a very difficult space to be able to be in, because you want to be able to create that safe environment for the student, and one of those things is calling them by what they want to be called, and there's that definite clash of cultures and things like that. You know, I don't envy people in that position, because it's a very hard space to be in, because you're an outsider in that space. But there's a clash that it's kind of a no-win situation. So thank you for sharing that, Alex. Appreciate it. Does anybody else want to share anything, say anything?
Yeah, I want to share something. I posted something in the chat about accent as a bias thing, because there are even students, among students, if they know that you have an accent, they don't want to listen to you. And it feels bad for that student who's not a native English speaker. Like, instead of sharing, she would rather, or he would rather just keep quiet, because nobody wants to listen anyway. So things like that. Instead of listening intently, just so you understand better, no, she's got something. Even worse is a teacher. My experiences with other teachers, I came from the East Coast, and once they don't get you, they would say, oh, you go back where you came from. So that becomes really bad.
Yeah, and you know, part of trying to do that is creating a culture where it's okay in that space, which is always really kind of hard to do. I know I work with a lot of ELLs, and I have a very white name, Pike, and a lot of times it's like PK or Pick, or things like that. It's like, okay, I understand that you're trying, and I'm trying to work with you, and so trying to express that out into the rest of the group to say it's okay in this space because they're trying, but that language barrier sometimes doesn't cross over. So let's work on what do you want to be called in the right way? But even still, there's that pushback from places, but it's still trying to keep that space of this is a core part of an identity to be able to talk about correctly pronouncing my name. I will be willing to help you work through that in that space, and it's okay to make mistakes. Ooh, we are running way later than I thought we would. All right, so I'm going to kind of speed through this, which hopefully is okay. Medical bias. This is where someone with a medical issue is treated differently from others. And I will throw my own personal experience into this. I am a type 1 diabetic, and I have been since I was 3 years old. And going through school was very challenging in some respects, because teachers treated me differently. I sneezed. Oh, you need to go to the nurse. I just sneezed. I wasn't invited to birthday parties because I couldn't eat sugar, and I was treated differently because of that. So there are those spaces where, the medical space will affect them. And we know students are walking in with all sorts of issues. And that issue could be medical, it could be familial, it could be whatever. But being able to say, all right, where are you coming from? How is this going to affect our space? Opens it up so that they feel included. And they're not, oh, I don't want to deal with that kid because they are medically different. I spent 15 years teaching, and every year the diabetic student ended up in my classroom because the other teacher couldn't handle it, which I called bullshit on because that's not okay. And there's other things like that as people are struggling with medical spaces that, that struggle is something that affects their learning when they feel left out. And yes, Andre, invisible illness are often completely discounted.
Bill, I'm going to say that working with elementary schools and the religion has been a big one for us to have to rearrange holidays, and a lot of them don't celebrate birthdays, to making sure it's equitable for the classroom and having to turn things around to make it to where it's be your favorite book character instead of doing Halloween. Making it just celebrating, it's a celebration day just so that everybody can celebrate. So we're celebrating birthdays all together. It makes it really hard.
Yeah, and we can tie medical bias into as well with religious bias, because that does actually affect a lot of different things. I know here in Arizona, we used to have an Easter break that has now shifted to be spring break, because we want to make sure that we're not offending, someone who is a non-Christian. And so there are those pieces that need to be taken into account. And, how can we make sure that we're treating everybody in that same fashion? Even though September 11th, we all remember all of a sudden Muslims were demonized, but it was a couple of bad eggs in a much larger group. But students did feel, some Muslim students were like, oh, I'm getting harassed and I'm being demonized in this space because of that societal bias that had happened because of that event. And we can see that in a lot of different things as we're moving through that space. We are at 10:55. So I want to make sure that I'm aware of your time, so I'm going to stop sharing. We do have some other ones that are within the presentation to talk about, but we do also want to make sure that pay attention to your time. One of the big things that we want to make sure that we're doing as Mesa USA is moving more with the Designing for Equity, is that we check in with our own biases and we have our students check in with our own biases. And sometimes that can be hard. Some students are going to come in very strong about, this is my opinion, but is that an opinion or is that a bias? So we need to make sure that we're having these conversations, and we try to do it in a way that can demonstrate it, because this is a big topic that is sometimes hard to talk about. And it's uncomfortable to talk about sometimes too. And so we want to make sure that we can create something where students can experience it and see what it is, to be able to start those conversations in a safe way where people feel listened to and respected in that space. And so hopefully this activity can be one of those. At the end of the convening, we will be sharing all of the recordings and the presentations with everybody who's attended. So you will be able to get a copy of this recording, as well as a copy of the slides. So I really appreciate everyone being here. We are breaking for lunch, and then we will be back. It will be 12 o'clock Arizona time, which means it's 1 o'clock New Mexico time and 3 o'clock Eastern time. So I appreciate all of you on here. I hope you have a good lunch, and I hope this was enjoyable. Thank you very much.